Kalimera σας, and thank you very much for having me here and giving me the opportunity to present parts of my work, which is dealing with social innovation and civil society as a driver for change. Effie yesterday asked the question about the added value of having researchers dealing with issues relating to refugees, for example, or practical implications. And for myself, having a very broad practical approach, I think it's also a challenge for us being in academia to once fulfilling academic requirements, and on the other one, also doing research which has a purpose, which I think all of us feel that we want to contribute to. So the complexity of the situation in Lesvos has been evolving over time. So what started off as an emergency situation in 2015 has over time become a problem which is becoming more and more institutionalized. And what I've been doing, I've been talking to various actors in civil society and trying to understand how the situation has evolved since the crisis. And theoretically, I've been applying a public value theory approach, and I've been trying to juggle between theory and practice, so to see how I can feed theory through practice as well. And a key thing is time matters. I think we all know that. But for example, this just gives you an overview. So don't look into the figures, and it's the figures from Greece, but it gives you an indication of how the number of refugees in 2015 and 2016 evolved and developed over time. And it just gives you a snapshot. And what I want to show, the figures is about Greece, but it's more or less the same curves would happen to Lesbos. And why is it important? Because in my various interviews I had, I could, in hand on the coding afterwards, identify there were different faces over the time. So it started off with this human solidarity, which was in August, until August, which was mainly initiatives here from the island, trying to cope with the situation. Then there was the exodus, where we yesterday heard there was the biggest number of people arriving at the island, and formalizing also where external help came in under siege. It was after December, where there was a situation of a lot of NGOs coming, a lot of civil society persons, and Greek also local people feeling overwhelmed. The limbo situation, which is happening, both of the refugees becoming stuck on the island, as well as people living here, local, suffering because of the lack of tourism coming in, and the big question, what comes next? So what am I doing? So I just wanted to give some of the voices from the interviews to show you where the work came from and how it evolved afterwards. So for example, here's some, if you see the look in their eyes, if you see the state that they are in, you don't turn your back. You help with whatever you have. It's not a choice. It's what people say from the island. Half of the population of this island are refugees. They came from there, so they know how it is to be a refugee. It is in our DNA. I don't think there was so much tension in the beginning. I think the tension happened afterwards. I think the biggest problem is that we lost our tourism. So many people are feeling very, very frustrated, angry, and upset. But I'm not really sure that's what is going on. There's a lot of money in this. Again, NGO, medias, politicians, everything. A lot of money on this island that goes through this island. They understand that some, I say some, because I still believe it's not all NGOs are the same. They're targeting only the money with just a big hype title, Help the Refugees, and the subtitle is under, Let's go and collect a lot of money. Of course, there will be a big scar, because this is also an emotional. You know what happened? There was a lot of people that used to spend Christmas together and to have holidays together. Because of this, they don't hang out anymore. They should maybe have targeted more bringing people together than to tear them apart, because with their actions, they have become a part of tearing people apart here. Then, in the end, it's left to the common man to sort it out himself. If the resources are there, we'll sort it out. If the resources are not there, it's going to be that's the fragile part. Then we're going to fight each other, and that's what I'm worried about. Okay, do I live in a country or not? My life is dependent from how the volunteers will help us. What if the volunteers are not here? How are we going to deal with all that? what is lacking in society is a true leader, somebody who stands up, inspires, and motivates people. And then the last one, smart action. Smart action is the action which would unite the people, not separate them. What could this be? So this is just some quotes which I gather from through the interviews. And the consequences, I mean, there are 3 pictures here. One is an image from Moria from last year, and it's the snow-covered tents. I'm not sure how it's going to be this year's organized, but winter is coming up, and we knew the problem, what happened last year. At the same time, what we had discussed last year, people on the street here, they are also not as tolerant as they have been in the previous last year. And the third one, it's also notion. I mean, the movement on the ground. People are doing things. People are active. Refugees are also helping. This is the try to get out of Moria and find another placing. But the challenging is right now is actually how do you deal with this information, what you got, and which I got, and how do I pursue it also theoretically? So there is the whole thing of the 2 contrasting views of public value, which is a theoretical concept. The big challenge has been, because there are 2 approaches, one managerial part and one more societal part. And the big question is, because the managerial part had been developed in a situation where you have an authorizing, where everything is functioning. You have an authorizing environment, you have an operational capacity because you can relate to it, and you have a public value outcome you set as a goal. But in a situation, in a complex situation, and also in a situation where you don't have a clear authoritative authorizing environment, you need another approach. So theoretically, I merged the 2 concepts and added the public value agreement approach, which I sense it is something which is applicable to Lesvos, and I will put it into a bigger context, but it's something which is generally also happening right now, is how do you negotiate what is a public value outcome, and how do you deal with it? So what I did a dynamical systems approach to try to understand and analyze the situation on Lesvos, which it is a bit complicated, but I took a step back, trying to use the interviews and trying to see where they fit in. So you can start in different parts, but if you start on the situation down on Lesbos, in the left part, it is where I said that there was a crisis which over time has been evolving to a problem. Because the key thing is here, it evolves over time. And when you see through the interviews, what I understood is, I mean, you have the operating capacity, which is the ability to cope, and you have acting to solve a problem. And that's, for example, what I had the solutions fit for purpose. Those are the many small social innovation products, I would say. This is outcome, which is about improving situations, for example, be it through the furniture, be it through different activities where you have actually a product which is improving their capacity. But the whole problem, what you have, and what I sensed, is that these are parts. If you don't get them together, there will always be small parts, but they will never do the systemic change what is happening. And what the problem is here on the island is now is the level of trust. So this trust, which is, I mean, if you took it, you can take it from bottom up. That's the circle which comes from down. You have a top-down institutional approach. But the institutional approach, as I said before, I think we all realize that hasn't really happened. So the key thing has been that the bottom-up initiatives have been the ones who have been and are also free, and actually, if they are able to get trust back into society, can cause something which, if you look at this one, is it can tear you apart, and if you don't take it into consideration, then you have a problem into the situation. But it can give you the added value also of aligning the people. And this is what I call the awareness, engagement, alignment, and action part. So the alignment is actually the key thing is that people start talking to be able to do a more joint action to have done before. And the question what I have begun generating this trust in the society is also a part which I think that you need the courageous conversations for. The conversations what we had yesterday, we discussed about them, what are them? And they are based on a collaborative rationality, on authenticity, and you deliver it in a zone of disequilibrium. So you ask those questions, you ask your provocative question. You have a zone where you dare to discuss things you normally wouldn't do from each other otherwise. And who should take part of them? It should be everybody who is sense affected. But of course, everybody can't be, but at least representatives of everybody. And the key is how to do it. If you start small, you can grow it. And what's the role of leaders in leadership? I think that hoping for a leader to come, that won't happen. And I think there has been a bigger leadership here already. So the question is, how can you align those leaderships? And the key thing is that you get there to keep the zone of disequilibrium. So when I heard about this as initiative, it was for me the question, can Lesvos dialogues become such a space where it's possible, where you can have a conversation about things you don't dare to talk about, or you don't because it's not the right thing to do. And I think we discussed it afterwards, yesterday as well. You need to have those discussions, because if you don't discuss them, they're happening, you're sweeping it under the carpet. So the question is how to deal with it. And for me, it's the big question here, could Lesvos dialogues become such a space where different stakeholders together try to look at the problems on Lesvos? You can't solve the world, but you said as well, there are world problems and they roll out locally. So that would be my question and my plea as well.